It is game week 6. We are back for another FPL podcast. I am your host, JRich. You are my main man, my co-host, Tom, repping the fresh Newcastle kit. I love to see it. Show it off for everyone who's watching. Show it off for the boys back at home. And you said it was cheap, so you may have to, get the boys something on your way back. But we're back for game week 6, another FPL podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe for all of our new content. But Tom, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. A £4 Newcastle United alternate shirt from Turkey is beautiful. So if anyone wants a Real Madrid kit, I saw a Brazil kit, they've got literally everything. I even saw the guy who was selling the shirts was in a Hull City kit, which I was just baffled at.
With the shorts?
No, he wasn't full. He didn't have shin pads on, but he was in a Hull City, and I was all the way into somewhere random in Turkey, and someone supporting Hull. Crazy. But yeah, I think this week we can keep it kind of short and snappy. I mean, no one kind of watches this anyway. But I think the only person regularly watching is Kieran. So no harm done there. But there is a couple of things I want to run through, like game week 6 wildcard options, who we're looking at, maybe go through our team. And also I've lined up a few quickfire questions, which I think I want to quiz you on. I want to put you on the spot. You've had 6 game weeks now of FPL. You're now becoming an mini expert. And I think we need to put you on the spot and see what your thoughts are. So I asked the world of Twitter for their main FPL queries, and I think I got a total of 1 response. So I've also scoured everyone else's queries on the big channels like Focal or Raptor or whatever. I've scoured their questions, and I'm going to ask you some of those key ones. So that's my plan for today.
Yeah, lucky me. It's only been 6 weeks, but you're already ready to quiz me on the world of FPL. But let's get into it because there is some things that we do need to discuss, especially when it comes to the news. The biggest one, especially in the past couple of days, was David Raya, who's not necessarily expected to play this week, which is a big problem for a lot of people. You see he's the 5th most transferred in player. And now all of a sudden, there's reports that he may not be available due to a muscle injury. And we'll see. It could screw a lot of people, especially people who were planning on transferring in those Arsenal assets now that the City game is over. You may be looking to make some replacements. And then the other big one is Joao Pedro, who has another ankle injury, and he's not expected to play this week and potentially could be out the following week as well. A player who was transferred out quite a bit. And then another one that we need to look at, especially for our team, because we made I wouldn't say a mistake, but Rodri is going to be out for the whole season after tearing his ACL against Arsenal. So that's another big piece as far as City goes, and the domino effect of that is going to be a big one. But let's get into our team from this past week because we do have some changes that we already made. And so you see, I forgot to captain Trent. So Tom, I do apologize to you. I captained Haaland. Thankfully, he scored to save my ass. We did have Rico Lewis in the starting lineup. He didn't play, so we got Carver-Lewin as a replacement. As you can see here from the points, Saka did get the assist. But outside of that, we didn't get a lot. Matoma got really lucky on assist, and Wemo did score. Eze once again disappointed after the comments were on our ass about having Eze in the team for another week. We rolled with Isak, and he did nothing. Haaland thankfully scored. Trent was great. Flecken did get 3 points, so that was all right for us as well. But into the team heading into this week, you told me on Sunday that we have to get ahead of these price rises, and we made 2 key changes. If you watched the pod from last week, we did bring in Kai Havertz for Isak, as we talked about, and then we also brought in Gabriel for Rico Lewis, which at the time was a very good decision. But now with Rodri being out, Tom, what do you think about Rico Lewis, and is he going to be in game week 7 wildcard consideration or following game week 6? Because now with Rodri out, he's probably going to be playing a lot more minutes for City going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview. Good work, JRich. I think the only thing you got wrong was, I don't know who David Raya is, but I know David Raya. Well, he's Spanish.
Raya.
You got to get that. David Raya. Come on. Yeah, I think Lewis is actually... The thing is for us in our team is we wanted rid of the Lewis headache. He was just like Pep Roulette. We hate to see it in, with his selection every time. And it was kind of frustrating because he was not playing. And I think for us, we just wanted Gabriel in, makes sense, move the price ranges. I do think, though, with Rodri out for the season, it does have the opportunity for Lewis to either play a right back and invert or to just fully start in midfield, which we've seen him do. And I was looking back at it. I think he started 5 out of the last, if you include the Champions League as well, he started against Inter. But in the Premier League games, out of the first 5, he started 4. and was obviously subbed off at halftime for one of them. It didn't come on against Arsenal. So I think in the easier games, like they've got Fulham coming up at home and otherwise, I think we can see Rico Lewis actually start those games. My only fear is that Newcastle away fixture in the next one. I think if Pep starts him there, it gives us really good information and it will be rest of the season. Just hold Lewis and just start him. And I think if he doesn't play, the benefit of Pep is he tends not to sub his defenders. So you have someone on the bench for Rico Lewis. So I think if you have him, hold him. If you don't have him for wildcard, it's definitely one to consider. It's just that question mark of like I think if you have a structured defense where you know two of your other defenders are definitely going to play and you've got some bench cover elsewhere, then Rico Lewis isn't a bad third option for an entry into that Man City defense rather than going for like Diaz or for 5.5 million or Gvardiol for 6 million.
Yeah, I think it does open up things for Gvardiol as well, right? He was a guy who was heavily transferred out of teams last week because City's not getting the clean sheets. They're going and playing Arsenal this past week. But now I think it does open up things for him. You know, Rico Lewis was a player who, as you mentioned, was starting a lot in absence of Kyle Walker. Now Walker is back. We don't know how much he's going to play relative to Lewis, but as you said, he can play in that center mid role and can thrive in it. And we'll see how they ultimately decide to play those rotations. But he should be a fixture in the team now. At this point, would be pretty surprising if he's not playing, 60 minutes a game. There was that one game, as you mentioned, where him and Gvardiol rotated and they each played a half. But outside of that, he's been playing almost every minute of every game. And with the fixture run they have coming up, it's definitely looking pretty good. But I love having Gabriel, Trent, and Robinson. As much as I don't want to pay up for defense, it's just set and forget. Locked and loaded. No real issues there. I do have some concerns about Jota, but this week, another good matchup. Hopefully he starts. He's kind of the main concern for a lot of people if you still have him. We didn't want to spend to transfer him out. We didn't pick Diaz in the beginning. We picked Jota. He was the striker. We'll see if he plays. Nunez started last week and played well with a phenomenal goal. Hopefully Jota does get the nod this week. Outside of that, I think it's just Matoma that we talked about last week. Wanted to get him out. Didn't have the transfers to do so, but don't mind the matchup against Chelsea. Saka, Eze, especially against Everton, and Mbeumo look phenomenal. Havertz, Haaland up top. Do you have any thoughts on captaincy for this team this week? Do you want to just roll with Haaland against Newcastle, or do you want me to actually put Trent in the captain spot this week?
I think you're right. Just talking about Jota for 1 second before we go on to captaincy is he scored 2 goals in midweek. Well, yeah, last night, but midweek in fixture of the EFL Cup. So I think he's probably in good contention. Him and Nunez started, and Jota actually started as the 10 behind Nunez. But considering they're both kind of competing for that number 9 spot, Jota scored 2 goals and then came off at 60 minutes while Nunez had no goals and came off at 90 minutes. My expectation is Slot took off Jota at 60 minutes to get him rested, ready for the weekend. So my expectation is Jota starts, and I think Wolves away is probably a good fixture for him. So I wouldn't be too worried if you're a Jota owner. Luis Diaz was rested, and I think he'll start. The main reason why I don't think Luis Diaz is a lock, and we can talk about it on Wildcard, is just the questions around Gakpo and stuff, but we can get onto that later. Otherwise, in the team for captaincy, I don't know what it is, but for some reason, I just don't think Haaland's going to haul against Newcastle this week. His last 3 games against Newcastle, he's got 1 goal and 1 assist, and that's total across the 3 games. So typically, Newcastle away is a pretty tough fixture for Man City. I think last game away at St. James, he got 1 goal, but then wasn't around for much of the game. So I just think in terms of like being prolific, I think Saka's probably our best option for captain this week. Or are we just overthinking it and we just go with Haaland? That's kind of where my head's at. Like, Haaland hasn't let us down so far. Can he come in? Newcastle don't look as strong as they have in the previous seasons, and that's probably the only other caveat that I would say is if we're watching Man City against Newcastle and Haaland scores in the first 10 minutes, we're already thinking, like, why on earth did we not just captain him and set and forget him? There's quite a few teams still without Haaland, and I think they're going to struggle to get Haaland in at 15.3. So I think having him as captaincy option even just benefits us more. That's kind of where my head's at with it all. I don't know what you think in terms of captaincy.
Yeah, so I was thinking, Trent, Saka, Haaland, obviously those are kind of our main 3 options. I don't think we need to overthink it in that regard. But one thing, and I'm sure you'd agree about this when it comes to Newcastle and comparing them to what City does, City's strongest side right now is their right side. And if Savinho's in the team and he's playing, which we'll see how him and Foden operate, because Foden's expected to play probably as well. Savino should be playing, and then we'll see what they do on the left. It's been a lot of Grealish. Don't really expect him to play that much. But if Savino's playing down that right side, that's really where Newcastle's been the worst on defense, is down the left side for them, whether it's Lewis Hall or it's Lloyd Kelly. Neither of them have been playing well. And so when you talk about the way that City attacks, and especially our most prolific, as the way I see it, it's down that right side for them and Newcastle's left side of defense, which has really, really struggled. So that's the only reason why I'd say maybe we do keep Haaland in there, because I think, you talk about the way Savino's been playing pretty much every game. He's getting involved, creating chances for Haaland, creating chances for everyone in the middle. So that's where I kind of stand. But if you wanted to go Saka, especially because we have Havertz, I think it makes our team have a higher upside, because you're looking at Saka, and as you mentioned, almost every single week now, every time they score, he's involved in almost every single goal. He wasn't involved in one of the goals, but he did get the assist on the corner to Gabriel this week. So I'm fine if you want to go Saka. I think it's a great fixture for Arsenal. I think they're going to be so hungry after what happened last week. They had 10 in the box for a whole half, only to draw against City. And Saka, I think, is more than ready to come out and have a great game. So I'm fine with captaining him. We can have Haaland at vice captain and leave it at that. But how do you feel about Saka captain this week?
Yeah, I think, well, they played last night in the EFL Cup, and I think they scored 5. I know Sterling scored, Havertz scored.
Yeah.
Saka got 1 assist out of the 5 goals. So that kind of worried me a little bit, but he did come off early, and I think he looked sharp generally. So my bet would be Saka's definitely, he hasn't scored many this season so far, but he does look sharp. So, and obviously on penalties as well, which is a massive plus. In a game which, like you say, they're going to be hungry after Man City, I can see them coming out of the blocks, scoring early. Maybe like 4-0, 4-1. I can see Arsenal scoring quite a few goals, especially if they get an early goal, they're going to go on and push on. So I think in terms of fixture, Arsenal definitely have the better fixture at home against Leicester than Man City away at Newcastle. But it's just how good Haaland has been this season is the only thing which puts me off it. So personally, I would probably, for our team, maybe think about Saka captain, but I'm 50-50 split down the middle. So I'll leave it up to you this week. Because last week I picked Trent. You didn't even captain Trent. So it just doesn't even matter. We don't even know where. Just select anyone. Select Robinson and captain him. I don't
Select
know.
Robinson and captain. I mean, if you want, we can. If you want, we can. So it sounds like you're not quite there, and that's okay. We'll leave Haaland as captain. We'll leave him captain. We'll save it. Because,
Cool.
I'm for it. The big man with the big boot. It didn't fail us last week. We could have got 4 extra points, but it's fine. But Tom, you do have some questions for me, don't you?
I do. I want some questions about what you think the locks are on Wildcard, and then I've got some quick fire round questions for you as well. So let's get into that. Okay, so JRich, Game Week 6 is upon us. I think from what I can see on FPL Twitter, everyone is on Wildcard. I'm not personally, because I wasted it in Game Week 4. Our team isn't. You might be thinking about it personally, but I'm not sure. But I thought it was useful to go through who I think your locks, or at least heavy consideration to be at each of these levels at different price points. But let's go through and start with goalkeeper. I think this is probably the easiest one for me. I think you either go for Flecken or you go for Raya. The question let's start with Flecken because it's an easy one. I think Brentford have great fixtures. I think he's made the most saves in the league so far, so he's going to get save points and a ton of fixtures. I know a lot of people are saying that Brentford's defence is probably one of the worst in the leagues right now in terms of statistics, but they've just played Tottenham away and City away. So it's to be expected, right? And they've got Wolves at home or West Ham at home, who both have looked pretty lackluster in terms of attacking prowess. So I think Flecken's a really good option for this turn of fixtures. It's kind of a set and forget. You don't have to worry about him. It's also frees up the money for elsewhere. And I think in terms of the 4.5 keepers, I saw a lot of people transferring Sanchez in for Chelsea, but they've got some tough fixtures after they've got 2 quite good home fixtures in terms of Brighton and Forest. But I think Brighton will score. And then they've got Liverpool away and Arsenal. I think Arsenal away or Arsenal at home. So it's quite a tough run for Chelsea after that. So I'd forget Sanchez or any Chelsea defenders for that matter. The only other keeper that I would consider is Raya. And I know people are saying he's injured, but he was pictured with a bandage on his leg. And I think it's more of an impact pain than an actual injury that's going to keep him out for long. Maybe it's one that you wait for information on, but I just think Raya's been so good this season. He's making saves because Arsenal are actually conceding more shots, but they're not necessarily conceding more goals. So, and with the change of bonus point system this year, goalkeepers tend to get the bonus points if they keep a clean sheet. So I really like Raya in there. It just depends you can obviously only have 3 Arsenal assets. Well, how are you going to factor that in? And maybe we can talk about that a bit later. But I don't know if there's any other goalkeepers you'd be thinking about, JRich, or whether you like these two out of the two. Which one would you pick necessarily?
Yeah, so these would definitely be the ones at the top of my consideration. Flecken, whether he's playing a good matchup or a bad one, he still seems to get it done, especially because he's making so many saves. As you mentioned, I think there could be maybe potential concern with Raya. Right, they have Leicester at home, they have Southampton at home, they have Bournemouth away, but then they play Liverpool, Newcastle, and Chelsea in a row. And so is there potential for Arteta to maybe keep him out so he's ready for those tougher fixtures? They're expected to win against Leicester, Bournemouth, and Southampton for sure, whether Raya's in net or not. But they definitely want him for the Newcastle game, for the Liverpool game, and the Chelsea game, because those are more important as it comes to the standings and up the table. But I would be considering putting him in the team. I don't think he's going to miss a ton of games. They still need him. There'll be some Champions League games in there as well where they'll want to have him and ready. But Flecken, I still think will be my number one because of what you're saving. But at 5.6, I don't hate the price on Raya at all if that's the way you want it to go.
Great. Love that. Love that we're in agreement. Love that. Defenders. These are the defenders which I think you should be thinking about. I think Gabriel is a lock on all people's wildcards. I've not seen a wildcard team without Gabriel. The one that I haven't seen in at all is Saliba, and I think he's had over 100,000 transfers out this year. And I think it might be a little bit premature if you're a Saliba owner. I don't necessarily think you need Gabriel in. Gabriel now at 0.1 more as well makes it a little bit more difficult. And the reason being is Gabriel only scored 3 headers or 3 goals the whole of last season, and he's already scored 2 this year. So he's already outperforming the statistics, like his expected involvement in goals. And I think that just isn't a sustainable way to carry on. Saliba did score more fantasy points last year, and I think the year before as well, if he was even joined Arsenal at that point. But definitely last year, he outscored Gabriel by quite a lot of points. So I think Saliba's still a good option. But if you could have one, you'd probably just go with Gabriel for the goal threat right now. I think Trent is one that we're seeing more of a lock in most wildcard teams. My main concern with Trent is I think he has great attacking threat still, ability to be involved in the game, and Slot really values him. I just don't like Liverpool's fixtures that much after this week. Wolves away is a pretty good fixture. But then, like you say, there is a turn. They've got Palace away. They've got a few more
Chelsea,
difficult fixtures after
Arsenal, that. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, so at that point, it's like, if Trent isn't going to get you clean sheets, is he going to be as involved as you've got to treat him at that point as a 7 million mid or attacker, at which point his expected goal involvement is a lot lower than others at that price point. And I think that's just something which we'll have to monitor. The main reason why I'm not, if I was on wildcard, I'd probably still try and fit Trent in if I could, is out of the first 5 game weeks, they've kept 4 clean sheets. And I just think they look a lot better defensively. So it's not, and I think with his price rise 7.1, looks like he'll probably rise again if they keep another clean sheet. It's one of those that if you don't get on it early, he tends to like get away from you price point wise, and you have to go without him. Yeah. So I think from a Liverpool standpoint, and I see a lot of people transferring out of Salah this week, is he enough cover for Liverpool? I'm not sure, but that's kind of where I stand on Trent. Lewis, we briefly mentioned. I think he's a good option at 4.6 or 4.7. I can't remember because mine's 4.6 in my team. I think with Rodri out, we see the ability for him to step up and be in midfield. He got an assist last night again for Man City in the Cup. The only issue is he played 90 minutes in the Cup. So
what's going to play next week?
That might, yeah, exactly. It might just be Walker plays again, in which case, if you just don't want the headache, I would just avoid Lewis. If you have a solid team where your other players are all definitely going to play and you've got bench cover, Lewis isn't a bad option where like even if he plays 5 out of the next 10, he's probably going to return in those 5 games. And as long as you've got cover for the 5 games he doesn't play, I think it's fine. The only other ones which I thought worth mentioning were Collins for Brentford, because I think Brentford's fixtures turn. And if you've got Raya in goal, not a bad option to have a Brentford defender. And the only other one which I love, but I know you're going to absolutely hate, is Mykolenko at 4.3 million. I just think he's dropped twice at 4.3. They've got Brantwaite, their best centre back, coming back in. Their fixtures turn. I just think that Everton might be able to turn it around a little bit more. And I like a 4.3 million starting defender for a decent defense. But let's get your take on that.
Yeah, so let's start with Gabriel and Saliba. Yeah, I'm totally with you on Gabriel versus Saliba. I would personally start Gabriel. I think he's just about a lock, even ahead of Trent, as you mentioned. Saliba, the only issue is that I just don't think he's going to score goals as much as Gabriel. And while Gabriel's outperforming now, I think based off how they utilize him, like you see, they're creating set pieces for him on corners. It's not for Saliba. And Saliba's the one creating the space for Gabriel to score those goals and opportunities. So if that's going to keep happening, which based off his success, why would it stop? It's really just, can he convert on those chances? And that's, up to him and whether they can convert on them. But as long as he keeps getting those opportunities, there's no reason why you shouldn't take Gabriel over Saliba. I'm with you on Trent. The fixtures do change, but if there was a defender I was going to bet that could still be involved even in difficult fixtures, it was 100% be him. I'm kind of so-so on Lewis right now. I don't think he's a player that you have to chase. You saw early in the season, people were chasing, getting Lewis in the team. You see his price go up, and then it goes down, and then it goes up, and then it goes down, because no one knows what to do with him. He's getting transferred in and out like crazy on so many teams. I'm willing to kind of wait and see what happens with Lewis. I don't think he's a player that you have to start. And then Collins is another one that you see here. I don't mind him if you think the Brentford defense can play much better. But yeah, Mykolenko, I brought him up a couple weeks ago, and this week he didn't play because he was sick. I mean, come on, bro. Like, help me out a little bit. My team desperately needs you. But at 4.3, he is great value. We've brought up the fixture swings. We've brought up how if for some reason they can figure it out, Everton is a great option on defense. And if Pickford can play some decent goalkeeping, they'll be fine. It's just, for them, it's about winning games, which is going to be a struggle, but I think they can play much better defensively and on the back end, and that's going to start with the fixture swing. They had a lot of tough games, but I don't hate it. I was on him early. I stuck with him. I'm pissed because he's like so bad. He's like 0.5 points per game right now, which is just dreadful. And Everton looks like they're headed for relegation. But at 4.3, he is good value. He plays every week. He does have some attacking threat. And at the price point he's at right now, he is a decent option that I do like. Is there anyone else you want to talk about as far as defense goes? Or are those kind of your main guys right now? I think it's Gabriel. I think it's Trent. I honestly do think for the price, Mykolenko is decent. And then I wouldn't say I'm sold on Lewis to be a wild card option that you have to have on your team.
I just don't think there's much value in defense this year. People still have Pedro Porro at 5.6 million, and he's getting like 2 points a game now. I just don't see the value in going big in defense, which is why, like, part of the reason of Trent and Gabriel, they're great picks, but until their form turns, I think Arsenal is still such a good option for defense-wise, but maybe Trent is less so going forward. The other thing about defenders is just like there's so many good 4.0, 4.5 options. I don't think this week there's many good for defenders that are 4.5 onwards, other than Brentford and even Arsenal. I don't think the fixtures are very good generally. So maybe it's just a case of you just want to set and forget those. There's quite a few 4.0 defenders that want to play as well. So maybe let's jump onto midfield now. So yeah, for the midfield options, JRich, we have Saka, which I think is a lock in all teams. I think their next two fixtures, they just look really good attacking. I don't see any teams without Saka, so we don't really need to talk about him. Rodgers, I think, just offers so much value, and it's kind of like, for me, is just if you're going to go so big elsewhere, you kind of need one player, and it's either like I see a lot of people going Smith Rowe, I see Rodgers a lot, I'm seeing Semenyo a lot, and I think like those players are all kind of good at that price point, and I see people jumping between them. I just think Rodgers is a lot cheaper than any other options. I think he's the only viable like 5 million-ish player that I see playing in a decent side and attacking. They've got Ipswich away as well, which I think is a good fixture for them. I just don't think Smith Rowe, Fulham's fixtures look a little bit difficult. Semenyo as well. I see him in pretty much every Game Week 6 wildcard draft. I see Semenyo, and I absolutely hate Semenyo as a pick. I think he has two good fixtures, but then it's really, really difficult to get rid of him. And I think his data was also skewed because he was playing striker or even further up front before Evanilson come in, and now Evanilson is playing striker. He's out on the wing. I know he did score against Liverpool and was disallowed, Semenyo, but I just think you're setting yourself up, and this is just like a little bit of learning from being a game week's 4 wildcard and seeing Brighton's 2 amazing fixtures and then trying to get rid of them. If your assets don't perform, you then have less, you're using your transfers trying to take out assets who have bad fixtures rather than targeting ones that are doing well. And I think the people that have Semenyo in after these 2 game weeks, regardless of whether he does well or not, are going to be instantly looking to be transferring him out. And if your rest of your team is kind of locked for the long term, maybe that's fine. But I don't see you in a position at game week 9 having Semenyo in your team and wanting to take him out. There's probably other fires you're going to be wanting to pull out with your free transfers or planning. So I just don't really like him as a pick, but happy to hear your view on that. The only other ones which we're talking about is Mbeumo's a lock in all teams. We said this, we talked about him for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, you did.
We transferred him in early to get ahead of the price things. I see loads of people. I think his goal against Tottenham as well has just kind of made him skyrocket. I think he'll go up to 7.3 now, potentially.
He's
their
7.2
fixtures
right
look
now.
great. Yeah, with Tony going to Saudi, he's just the best player for Brentford. He's on penalties. He's their most attacking player. 7 million around that price point. I think that's great value. And then the only other 2 in terms of premiums are Palmer and Salah. And I think I see most people doing Salah to Saka this week. One of which is I'm considering in my team is doing the same. I just hate the idea of going without Saka for Wolves away. He looks rested. He came on for 30 minutes last night and scored in the cup. I see so many people taking out Salah, and I think it's one that if we had him in our team, I'd definitely look to captain him over Haaland this week. And I think he's going to punish a lot of people. Equally for Salah, like that, like you said, the fixtures turn. And with 12.8 million, if you've also got Haaland, it's so difficult to keep him in as well and have a decent team elsewhere. So keen to get your views on Salah. And just very quickly, last one is Palmer, which I've still got him in my team. I think he's great. I still prefer him over Jackson, even though how well Jackson's performing. He's on penalties. He's got Brighton at home and Forest at home, which I think Chelsea will do well before their fixtures kind of turn. And at that point, we can kind of reassess whether Palmer's a good option. But that's my quick look at the midfield. I don't know where you want to start.
All right, so we'll start with Saka. Love it. I think he's phenomenal. The game weeks, the fixtures all look great. He's been playing well, and I love what we're doing right now with the team. And especially when you talk about players that you can play through bad form, bad fixtures, like he's definitely one of those guys. And I will touch on Palmer as well, right? You look at his fixture run, and I'm just going through it right now. You could have him in the team basically all year because he's got a bad game against Liverpool, Arsenal, Spurs, City, another one against Villa. And at that point, you're all the way up to February. So he's got like 4 or 5 bad games all the way. There's no big, long stretch pretty much for the whole year for Palmer to where he has any bad fixtures. So that's one of the reasons where if you have him in the team, now you may bring him out on Wildcard, whatever. But when you talk about players that you can have in the team basically all year, he never has a stretch where he has Tottenham, Arsenal, City in a row where you're like, okay, now we're getting into bad territory where you don't want to have him. So if you like him, or I love Cole Palmer, I think he's going to be phenomenal. He can run through those bad fixtures. Saka, another similar player that I agree you can play no matter what. Even against City, we were like, I don't know. He got 4 points, better than the minimum, and did better than expected. Love Rodgers. The way he's playing right now, the way he's utilized on that team, and the price point is really good. Surprised you didn't like Semenyo because, as you mentioned, he's in a lot of wild cards, but he also has very good odds to score every single week. But to your point, when you bring up the fixtures for Bournemouth, he's got Arsenal, Villa, and City in a row. And do you really want to have that happen? Because this happened with Matoma. We're going to get Matoma out of the team, and he's still in the team because we don't have enough transfers to fight the other fires, and so we're stuck with him. But I don't mind having him. But after that, what's that, game week 10 when they play City? After that, you have to have him in the team. He's got an amazing run from game week 11 all the way to game week 21. So a 10-week stretch where he just should absolutely cook for you. So to your point, maybe you don't have to have him in right now. And Mbeumo's a lock. Salah, I don't think is a lock for me. I'd rather pivot down to Saka or Palmer and run with those guys. So Salah's always going to be good, a player you can play through tough fixtures, but the way they're playing right now, I just don't know if he's in the best form right now. It seems like for whatever reason he's not converting on his chances, and that can always turn for Salah, and he can play phenomenally. But at the price point when that we're gonna have Haaland in the team no matter what, it's difficult to make it happen when you're already putting Gabriel in, and you're probably looking at putting in Trent as well. Having Salah and Haaland, who plus Saka, we're basically using all of our funds at that point, right? Yeah. Other midfielders I was looking at as well. We haven't touched on Eze, who I think should be in consideration to some extent because his fixtures do look pretty good going forward. I know people are very disappointed about him, but he does look to be in a decent spot and I think can play well for the next few weeks. And then outside of that, it's really just, as you mentioned, Smith Rowe is the other one. But I have to ask you about Luis Diaz. I don't think he should be in your wildcard considerations, but at 7.9 right now, he is very expensive. He's obviously performing very, very well. And there is the fears of Gakpo, but where are you at on Luis Diaz? Because some people love him, and I've had him in the team since game week 1. But it seems like it's about time to transfer him out and take those profits on Luis Diaz.
The thing is I think he's had 800,000 transfers in. And for me, I just think that's absolutely crazy. Yeah, I think that's absolutely crazy. I think he offers like insane value. This year, he looks like he's on fire. He's direct. He always looks to shoot rather than pass this year, which I think he's got his confidence up. He's converting a lot of chances. The thing is with me is just outside of Salah, I think the Liverpool attackers are kind of just a cluster of, you just don't know who's going to start each game week. You've got Nunez, Jota, Gakpo, Diaz, and they're fighting for kind of 2 slots. So you've got 4 players fighting for 2 slots. You've got to understand also that Liverpool have Champions League fixtures, so they're playing next Tuesday.
Yep.
If you're thinking that Diaz has been playing the best, surely that he will want to play. He'll probably play this Saturday. He'll play Tuesday. And then, I can't see a scenario where he's getting more than 60 minutes every Premier League game if he's looking to play all of them. And I think the only other stat that really confirmed it for me that I didn't want to get Diaz on in my team, or why you shouldn't keep in a wildcard team, is if you look at Diaz's expected goal involvements with Eze and Bruno Fernandes, they've both got exactly the same. And I know Diaz is on 40 more points than Eze and Bruno Fernandes, but it's just to put in perspective that I think he's been completely outperforming where he's been expected to be involved with. And obviously Eze and Fernandes have been absolutely woeful. But I just think from that perspective, with the uncertainty around it and the price point that he's at, I'd rather just have players in my team at this point who are just locked and playing. It's just less of a headache. Rather than chasing the points, which he's already got, those double-digit hauls, I don't see that being consistent. And I'd much rather just have someone that played week in, week out.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And so one player I want your quick thoughts on, and I'll bring up the reason why I want your thoughts on them. You talked about consistency. You talked about playing week in and week out. And I can't say this about this player, but after this week, they have Newcastle. Then they have Fulham, Wolves, Southampton, Bournemouth, Brighton, Spurs. At 9.3, should people consider putting in Phil Foden? Because now they're going to need him to perform well. And he's been going down a little bit. He started at 9.5. He's down to 9.3 now. Do you think there's any reason why you should consider Phil Foden either this week or next week in wildcards?
I think from next week, if Phil Foden is playing, he would be in my team now. And I think Man City's fixtures from game week 7 onwards look unbelievable. And I don't see Foden, if he manages to come in and play like how he was last season, I don't see him coming out of that team with De Bruyne looking a bit unfit. They've got kind of Savinho on one wing and they've got Grealish and Doku on the other. It's kind of that central position, which is kind of De Bruyne's been sitting in, but I just don't see a scenario where Foden won't be their main focus point and be as direct as he was with Haaland last year. I think if he plays, he's a great option, and I would love to have him at that Fulham at home game next week.
And so Fulham home, Wolves away, Southampton at home, Bournemouth away, Brighton away, Spurs at home. Then they have Liverpool away, but then they still have Forest, Palace, United, Villa. And then if you want to go further than that, Everton, Leicester, West Ham, Brentford, Ipswich, Chelsea. And that takes you all the way to February 1st, which and you may change the team by then. But yeah, exactly. Right.
And it's Man City. So I think the only thing is that's keeping me away from Foden, just because I want to see him this week against Newcastle. If he starts and he plays well, I don't see him coming out of the team. I can't see him being droppable. It's just a question of whether he's fit enough, he looks sharp enough. And I think it's going to be really useful information to see this week. But like you say, that's a great shout for the kind of other midfield slot. And I think if you have a Salah, a Saka, a Palmer, a great pivot sideways for more money at 9.3, and then you can upgrade elsewhere if that's what you're looking to for going forward. So I do really like Foden as a pick.
All right, Tom, let's get to the attackers then, because I feel like this will be a pretty easy one for both of us, but let's see where your head's at.
This is where I'm at. This is who I'm thinking is who you should be considering on Game Week 6 wildcard. You have Nicholas Jackson, who I think has been done really, really well so far. The main reason why I've kind of gone off him a little bit, I just think Palmer's more nailed. Jackson, obviously, I think Maresca came out and said the only competition for Jackson in the 9 slot is Nkunku, and the only competition for Palmer at the 10 slot is Joao Felix. And I think Palmer's got the 10 slot more locked down than Jackson necessarily does the 9 spot. I also think that I fell into the Jackson trap last year where he scored 2 goals and I brought him in for Watkins. He then blanked for like 4 game weeks in a row while Watkins scored like 7 goals. So I just think Jackson doesn't have the consistency. He doesn't look like a clinical finisher. He kind of needs 3 or 4 chances to score one, similar to a Nunes. And with the fixture swings past these first 2 game weeks, the next 2 games against Brighton at home, Forest at home, I just think if you've got Palmer, don't double up on Chelsea. I don't mind him as a pick, but I think there's better options in the likes, which we'll talk about. So you've got Havertz, which I think you can't really look past him. And maybe in our questions in a little bit, I'll ask you about whether you want to double up on Arsenal defence or whether you want to double up on Saka and Havertz. I do love Havertz. I think if he's playing up top, and again, this is the question, is with Trossard, he obviously got the red card, but he served the ban midweek, so he's available to play. Will Arteta continue to go with Trossard in the midfield and Havertz up top, or is Gabriel Jesus, who's played last night and looked pretty good, is he going to start up top and Havertz will drop to midfield? Because I think if Havertz plays midfield, you don't want an 8.1 million striker in a midfield position. But if he's up top, they've got Leicester at home. The next, what's the next home fixture after?
Oh, 1 second. Oh, it's Southampton and then Bournemouth. Bournemouth away.
Boom.
But Leicester home, Southampton at home, and then Bournemouth away. Then they got Liverpool, Newcastle, Chelsea.
There you go. Yeah, so I think for those 3, Havertz is in one of the best attacks in the league, 3 of the best fixtures you can have. If he's playing at striker, I think he's a really great option. The reason I really like Solanke is just how attacking Tottenham are. I think their defence is a bit of a shambles. Generally, same as last year, they tend to score 3 or 4 but can concede equal amounts. I think he accumulated an expected goal involvement of like over 3 just for the last game. And he probably should have scored more than the one that he did. I think if he starts ticking, Man United's not a bad fixture away at the minute, the way that they're playing. So I think Solanke could score in this fixture. And then if you manage to get through this fixture, I think they've got another tough fixture in game week 7 or more tough. I think Brighton away.
They're open.
At that point from game week 8 onwards, I think people are going to be looking to bring in the likes of Maddison, Solanke, Porro. I don't think Son's as good as value at 10 million versus Solanke and Maddison at 7.5 million. And I'd probably lean, I know you sent me a really interesting stat on Maddison in the week that he has the second highest expected goal involvements out of everyone in the whole league. So I think
behind Haaland
he's a really good option. Yeah, exactly, which is absolutely crazy stats. But I still would lean towards Solanke if possible. The only other 2 that I really like are Calvert-Lewin and Haaland. Obviously, you don't have to talk about him, but Calvert-Lewin is if he's the price point of 6 million, if he's all you can get, obviously Joao Pedro, as you mentioned, is injured. You're going to see a lot of people pivoting sideways to a Chris Wood or a Calvert-Lewin. I just love Everton's fixtures. The question is they're just such a defensively structured team that attacking output tends to be pretty lackluster. So it's just whether Calvert-Lewin can, just for someone who watches Premier League year in, year out, I always think of Calvert-Lewin as that player from like 4 years ago. I think he managed like 16, 17 goals in the Premier League. And since then, I think he hasn't hit double digits. So if he can get back to the levels he can score at, and I think he scored 3 goals so far this season already, or maybe 2 goals and an assist. With the fixtures, Crystal Palace at home I really like, and then they've got a really good fixture run. I'd probably favour him over the other 6.0 million attackers, just for the fixtures and also kind of set and forget striker.
Yeah, Tom, I'm totally with you. When you talk about Carver-Lewin, it's the same reason we talk about Mykolenko. He is a player who has an incredible fixture run. Palace at home, Newcastle at home, Ipswich away, Fulham at home, Southampton away, West Ham away, Brentford at home. Everton is horrible. There's no mistakes about it. They're a terrible team. They concede a ton of goals, but Carver-Lewin is the one player that gives them a chance to win a game at all, it seems like, and he's scoring goals and he's playing well. You talk about Solanke, I'm with you. I think that when you talk about a player who can be a difference maker, especially at 7.5 million, Solanke is one of them. You brought up his expected goals last game, 1.68 or 1.61, 1.68 for his total goal involvements. He did score one playing those 87 minutes. We brought up how Maddison is second in FPL in goal involvements, period, across the Premier League. And when you talk about the fixtures in particular, Man United away, Brighton away, West Ham at home, Palace away, Villa at home, Ipswich at home. They do have a game against City, but even after that, they have another month of good fixtures on top of that. So whether it's Maddison or Solanke, I would consider bringing them in now because I think that they're only going to go up in price as people realize what their fixture run is and Solanke continues to get in better and better form. I'm not as concerned about Havertz. I think he'll find ways to get involved for Arsenal, and obviously we love their fixture run. But I am with you. I wouldn't say Jackson is a player that you have to have. He's one I'm very intrigued by, though. I really like some of the things this Chelsea attack is doing. I think bringing in Jadon Sancho, you've already seen his impact to that team, getting assists, I believe, in back-to-back games. And now you look at Palmer, who we love and is a fixture in our team, and we consider putting him in the wild card. Absolutely. Jackson isn't quite there, but when he's on, it seems like he's scoring not just 1 goal, but 2 goals. And when Chelsea's scoring goals, they're not scoring 2 goals or 3 goals. They're scoring 4 goals, 5 goals, 6 goals like they put up against Wolves. And that's where when you talk about upside for a team, he is a player that has a ton of upside, even though he's inconsistent. And even though he may not be the best player in the Premier League, Chelsea loves him and they play him a ton, and he's heavily involved as their main number 9. So that's why I think when you talk about players that can be difference makers in FPL, Jackson has to be one of them. I think when I'm looking at Wildcard, though, obviously Haaland is going to be in our team. Like he's going to be in the team. We didn't talk about Xerxes, who did drop in price. I'm still waiting for him to kind of find his form because he has a good fixture run. They have Spurs, they have Villa, and then they have Brentford, West Ham, Chelsea, Leicester, Ipswich, Everton. So it's a solid run for United. And I think when you talk about, we didn't talk about Bruno Fernandes and how he's a player that should be playing much better. Every time he gets a chance, he's missing it, which sucks. But you continuously see the involvement. And I'm just wondering if Ten Hag is going to get sick of seeing Xerxes miss chances because he's had so many. If you look at the games and you've been watching the games, you look especially against Southampton, 1.4 expected goals he didn't score. Last week was a little bit tougher game against Palace, and to be honest, Man United didn't play very well, but he's constantly getting opportunities and he needs to convert. He hasn't scored a goal since the opener where he came on as a sub against Fulham, but it seems like every week, even against Liverpool, 0.88 expected goals. Not a player that I think you have to consider, but at some point, it feels like United's going to figure something out, and it's just a matter of if, not when. And so Xerxes is a player that I was looking at. Darwin Núñez, we already talked about him and how we're not quite ready to put him in the team quite yet. But I think of the two, I love your shout on Carver-Lewin. I don't know if you thought about Welbeck at all, knowing that Pedro's out for a little bit. But Haaland is for sure. Solanke is in heavy consideration for me. And I think Havertz, you can make the case for as well as a must-have in your new wildcard teams. How do you feel about those sets of players and some of the other ones I brought up as well?
I think you almost talked me into captaining Palmer. The way you talked about Chelsea, and I think it's right. I think they've had the most shots out of all Premier League teams. I think they've had the most passes out of Premier League teams. So although they're conceding still, from attacking perspective, they're putting great numbers up. And I see Palmer and Jackson doing really well over the next couple of game weeks. So I'm even considering Palmer captain for my own team this week then. The only thing which kind of pulls me away from that is your view on Xerxes, which I think was absolutely horrible. I just think you've got to stay away from all Man United assets in the minute until their fixtures turn. And at that point, you're probably looking at Dallo or Mazraoui at defence as an option. Bruno Fernandes is probably the only other viable option you can have for Man United, but I just don't like the way he's playing, not being able to convert. I saw like people on Twitter are absolutely hating on Bruno Fernandes at the minute. I still like him as a pick. Obviously, I started the season with him, but I just think with the way United are playing, he just doesn't look as, consistently performing at the level which you expect of Bruno Fernandes. The other player which I've always, the last couple of game weeks, I've started to think that if I was going to get a United player, it would be Garnacho. Yeah. But I just think Ten Hag, for some reason, just won't play him. Like, he started Rashford again. Like, he brought him off. Like, I'm seeing in the Cup as well last night. He just clearly doesn't know what his best 11 is. And Xerxes, Haaland, Garnacho, Rashford, these players are kind of all Ahmad as well. They're kind of like floating around, and none of them are like, okay, team sheet's out. We know they're going to be locked in there. So at that point, I just don't like Xerxes as a pick. But yeah, generally, I think that's kind of it for Wildcard. Hopefully that helps you make those kind of key decisions. What I want to quickly do is transition before we finish and wrap things up, JRich, is talk to you, put the spotlight on you, and let's go through some of the key questions which I'm seeing on FPL Twitter this week, and also a couple which I just think I don't really know the answer to, so I kind of want to get your view on.
Perfect. Yeah. Let's go, Tom.
So, are you ready?
Always.
Stay ready. You got to get ready. Okay, number 1. Solanke versus Havertz. If you could only have one, who are you running with?
Based off of what I just said, I think it's Solanke pretty easily. I like Havertz, but I think Solanke is a player that could be a difference maker, and I believe it's a $0.6 million difference in price. I would pick Solanke.
Nice. The Arsenal double up in defense or the Arsenal double up in attack? So if you consider both sides have Gabriel and Saka, it's basically, do you want Raya or do you want Havertz?
That's tough. I think I would go with Havertz, and I would still have Flecken as my keeper over Raya.
Nice. Okay. That's kind of where my head was at with it, but I love that. DCL, obviously we just spoke about him, versus Chris Wood, which I'm seeing on a lot of wildcards. Both playing 90 minutes for their team, both on penalties, both the main man at striker, both have really good fixtures. Who are you picking out of those two?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it last week, and I brought up Chris Wood as a player who has surprised me so far this season and is playing well. And whenever Forrest scores, he seems to be on the end of it. But I think that Carver-Lewin is slightly better in terms of what he offers, and I think he has a little bit more goal-scoring upside as well, based off what we've seen so far. Everton, I mean, they're conceding 2-3 goals a game. They got to score 2 to 3 just to stay in games at all. And, when you look at Forest, they're playing a little more defensive. They're not conceding as many, but they're also not scoring as many as well. So I just think the upside lies with Carver-Lewin, and that's where I would go.
Nice. Number 4. This one.
Oh, this is a JRich special right here.
Give some background to this one. This was just when I was in my head about FPL this week. Joao Pedro got injured and all my transfer plans were kind of scuppered. I'm still left with Brighton assets that I don't want. I was just thinking of completely transitioning my team. And it came down to, I can actually keep Salah in my team right now and have him alongside Saka. But it would mean having a 6.0 million striker and a 4.5 million defender. I think the best 6.0 million striker is Calvert-Lewin. And I think the best 4.5 million defenders for the fixtures and at the price point, I think is Mykolenko, as much as you hate that. So I think that's kind of where my head was at. The other thing that when I was thinking about it was like, is that too much focus on Salah? Outside of this week, I wouldn't be captaining Salah. At that point, do you want to distribute the funds from Salah away and would you rather have Trent, Solanke and Havertz? So it's kind of like, do you want 3 players which are kind of 7, 7.5, 8, or do you want the huge Salah and then take the hit in defense and attack?
Yeah, I think you're really, really overthinking this. You want the points, you want the consistency, you want the players that are actually going to be playing week in and week out. And really, this hinges for me on Mykolenko and how bad that Everton defense is. I think Carver-Lewin can be great. I think Salah can be great. But at the same time, we know that Trent's going to be a fixture and probably one of the highest odds for clean sheets almost every week. We've talked about our love for Solanke, and as long as Havertz plays well, I think that's probably the better scenario for you. You really need Salah to be great and not just like pretty good. You need to see the Salah that we saw for the first 3 game weeks every single week, or you're probably not returning on that, or you need Carver-Lewin to play very, very well, because going to him from Solanke or Havertz, I think, is a very interesting concept. But when you talk about going from Trent to Mykolenko, that's a completely different conversation of what you're going to get weekly. And I think I just prefer the consistency and upside of that left side with Trent, Solanke, and Havertz over Mykolenko, Salah, and Carver-Lewin.
Great, thank you. That's my decision made. You kind of talked some sense into me, and I love that. The only other thing which is on my mind this week is in my own team, I brought in Saka for Salah. That's kind of my main plan. The only other one is I'm going to have to get rid of Joao Pedro for one of these 2 bad boys. And obviously you said that you'd pick Solanke over Havertz. My only thing is I'd also be looking to get Solanke in probably at game week 8. At that point, would I rather just have Havertz for the short term, the Leicester, Southampton, the Bournemouth, and then get Solanke from his good fixture run from game week 8 onwards? Or do you still think it's worth just getting Solanke now?
I think if that's your plan, it's a good one, right? I think the only issue is that we've tried this before, where it's, I'm going to have him for a few weeks and then I'm going to transfer him out. And then next thing you know, a defender's hurt. This guy's not playing. Something else goes wrong, right? That's my only fear there. And I think as well, right? Even if you only get that 0.6 in savings, that may save you in a pivot elsewhere. And you may say, oh, wow, I can actually make this switch in my team somewhere else and use those funds accordingly. I don't hate it if that's the way you want to go. I think for people who are looking at this situation, it's what is the better play in terms of risk. And I don't mind the extra risk on Havertz because the upside is very, very high. But I think if you want to keep the funds, Solanke is a good option because I am heavily considering 2 to 3 Tottenham assets going forward. I think their fixture run is looking very, very good, and they're not being talked about enough, in my opinion, as far as wildcard goes. But I don't mind Havertz. Like, if you want to take Havertz for the next 3 weeks, go for it. Just hopefully the rest of your team can absorb that kind of issue, like any potential issues that may come, because you only have 1 transfer a week, or you're going to be paying for it every single week. So I think the answer is Havertz, especially when you talk about that game plan of having him for a few weeks and then going to Solanke. But if you're looking at building a team a different way and you can't afford that 8.1, I love Solanke as well.
Okay. I love that. That's everything. That was it. That's all I wanted to talk about today. You kind of talked some sense into me. I'm feeling a lot better about this game week than I was. The only issue for me and thing in my own team is I've got no Arsenal defenders and other fires to put out. So I'm just hoping Jamie Vardy just gets a breakaway goal and gets a lucky goal. And I'm praying for it. I know it. I'm trying to will it into existence. But otherwise, I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah, Tom, we said this would be a short one, and what do you know? We talked through everything. We talked through Wildcard, we talked through our team, we talked through Captaincy, we talked through some defenders that we're watching, some midfielders, some forwards, but is there anything else you want to leave the people with? Because there's a lot to go through. I think we'll probably do a full Wildcard, or maybe, we'll see. This team is interesting because I kind of want a Wildcard next week, but I think if we don't wildcard this team, we can wildcard mine, because mine has too many Liverpool assets. We're going to have to wildcard it probably next week for sure. So either way, we'll probably end up doing a wildcard next week, whether it's this team or my personal team. But is there anything you want to leave the people with before we get out of here?
I don't. I want to leave the people because the sun's still out and I want to go work on this tan.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. Thank you to everybody who's tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe for all of our future content, and we'll see you guys next week. We're out. Peace.
Peace.